Hello and welcome to Tin and Foil. We're going to be doing another deep dive today, talking about Admiral Byrd. I believe that's how his name is pronounced. It's B-Y-R-D. And we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. Let's start out with Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, born 1888 and died in 1957. He received a Medal of Honor, which is the highest honor of valor, if you don't know that. That can be given by the United States. He was considered a pioneering American aviator, polar explorer, and organizer of polar logistics. So because he had experience in different polar operations, he was asked to accompany other brigades and other ships that went into polar territory because he already had experience with it. He did many explorative flights and navigated expeditions that crossed the Atlantic Ocean, part of the Arctic Ocean, and a segment of the Arctic Plateau, which is a part of Antarctica, and part of the North Pole as well. Although that is somewhat disputed, but we'll get into that. Byrd claimed his exploration group was the first to reach both the North and South Pole by air. However, his claims to have reached the North Pole are disputed. He is also known to be the discoverer of Mount Sidley, the largest dormant volcano in Antarctica. He was forced into retirement because of ankle injuries that he received in 1908 from the Navy in 1916, but then transferred to the Rhode Island Naval Militia instead and received commendations from his commander, and in 1928 was promoted to captain. In 1926, Byrd and the Naval Chief Aviation Pilot Floyd Bennett attempted to fly over the North Pole in it's called a Fokker F Villa 13mm tri-motor monoplane, and was funded by Esdell Ford, president of Ford Motors. After landing from the 15.5-hour flight, they were both promoted. Byrd was promoted to commander and Bennett to warrant officer. They were also given medals of honor. This flight, however, is highly challenged because some of the sextant logs and the navigation logs were erased and rewritten, and that caused some conflicting information when they recovered the erased logs. Burt Balchin claimed that the flight speed required to reach their supposed location and return in under 16 hours was not possible, whereas defenders of the Byrd and Bennett flight say that a tailwind could have boosted their overall speed enough to make up for their lack of speed and allowing them to reach the North Pole and back in under 16 hours. Everything that I looked at for this, it looked like that is completely possible. Byrd also flew multiple expeditions over Antarctica and successfully was recognized by the American Geographical Society, and Byrd became the president of Pi Gamma Mu, the International Honor Society in Social Sciences, which, by the way, I will be doing another, maybe not a deep dive because there's not a ton of information on them, but I do want to look into Pi Gamma Mu because I've never heard of them before this. And they're still a society that exists, and apparently they funded and dealt with a lot of explorations in the first place. So I just think that's really something that I could look into, and it'd be very interesting. Byrd was involved in 3 Antarctic expeditions before Operation High Jump, and he had gained intimate knowledge of Antarctica and how aircraft operated in those conditions, which is why he was chosen to lead the operation in High Jump. Like I said before, they wanted somebody that already had polar experience, and he had been personally funded by Ford, the original owner of Ford Motors, and he'd already been hired before to do exactly this, do a flight into frigid conditions that other pilots may not have the experience or know how to navigate or fly in. So, safer to hire someone that has the experience already. In 1946, Byrd was assigned to Operation High Jump by Secretary of Navy James Forrestal. It is the largest Antarctic operation to date, lasting 8 months. So a really, really long expedition to Antarctica. The operation was supported by a large naval force designated Task Force 68 and commanded by Rear Admiral Richard H. Cruzen. 13 naval support ships, as well as USS flagship Mount Olympus and aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, along with 6 helicopters, 6 flying boats, 2 seaplane tenders, as well as 15 other assorted aircraft, were used for this mission. That is a massive naval fleet for what is essentially a scientific exploration to an unexplored territory. Which is kind of crazy. You might see me looking down a lot. It's because I'm looking at bullet points that I wrote down so that I can kind of use them as talking points. It helps me make sure that I'm accurate with what I am saying. I don't want to misquote somebody or give the wrong date or something like that. Instead of just saying things off the top of my head, it's easier if I have bullet points that I can talk from. The Armada explored an area the size of half the United States and recorded 10 new mountain ranges. It's a lot. During interviews following Operation High Jump, Byrd said multiple times that Antarctica would become the most important place in the world of science, which is a huge statement. He wasn't necessarily a scientist himself. He was, in the end, a pilot and a captain. Byrd was appointed officer for Operation Deep Freeze in 1956, which established permanent bases at McMurdo Sound, the Bay of Whales, and the South Pole, and established the permanent U.S. military presence in Antarctica to this day. So, I feel like everybody already knows this, but there is a permanent U.S. military presence as well as a permanent Russian presence, and Norway has scientific buildings there, England, and so this is why I should have wrote down bullet points for this. There's quite a few countries that have a stake in Antarctica, and it is considered a scientific continent only, which means nobody has a permanent stake in the resources or scientific discoveries there. Basically, almost every country involved in going there has signed a treaty that states that not only will they not drop any bombs on Antarctica or do any wartime activity in Antarctica, but they will also work together with other scientific communities that are already there to discover more. Byrd did die not long after Operation Deep Freeze. About a year later from his return from Operation Deep Freeze, he died of heart disease. And this is where we will start getting into some of the conspiracy theories. Now that I've given you some background on what High Jump was supposed to be and, Operation Deep Freeze, and a little bit of background on who Byrd was and what he did or what he had done for the military. Let's go ahead and start with what Operation High Jump officially stated that they were there to do. This is literally from their documents stating why they were in Antarctica and why they were doing an operation there. So let's go ahead and start with this. Operation High Jump, officially titled the United States Navy Antarctica Development Programs from 1946 to 1947, was a United States Navy operation organized by Byrd and led by Admiral Ethan Eric Larson. Operation High Jump's primary mission was to establish the Antarctic research base Little America 4. In order, High Jump's objectives, according to the U.S. Navy report, were to train personnel and test equipment in frigid conditions, to consolidate and extend the United States sovereignty over the largest practicable area of Antarctica's continent. This was later disputed and denied by them. Later on, they basically said that this wasn't their official goal and it was a mistake that they put in here. But that's what the official report said. To determine the feasibility of establishing, maintaining, and utilizing bases in Antarctica, and to investigate possible base sites. Developing techniques for establishing, maintaining, and utilizing air bases on the ice with particular attention to the later applicability of such techniques to operations in interior Greenland where conditions were comparable to Antarctica. Amplifying existing knowledge of electromagnetics, geographical, geological, hydrographic, and meteorological propagation conditions. And the last one is they had a supplementary objective of the Nanook expedition, which was a small equivalent to Operation High Jump that had been done in Greenland to test whether or not different planes and ships would be able to make it in frigid conditions. The theories that come in that differ from the official report say basically the following, starting with the first stage of the war, World War II. Sightings were reported by members of nearby British Antarctic bases that there appeared to be Nazis in nearby glacial caves. Now, this seems to just be one report. I didn't see anything else that said anything about this. I literally couldn't find any proof of this, but we're going to go ahead and go through and explain the theory of this one. So this idea stems from the fact that Germany needed oil for its general consumption, for margarine, for lamplights, etc. They used a lot of whale oil, and they didn't want to pay Norway for it anymore. That's where they had been getting the primary amount of their whale oil, was from Norway. So Hitler in 1936, in preparation for the upcoming war that he knew he was going to end up starting, he started manufacturing whaling vessels. But the areas nearby had been decimated already by other whaling operations. So Hitler found another plan. It was Antarctica. He found space between the Norwegian and British zones, and he formed a plan for an expedition to the area known as Queen Maud Land. The expedition was organized by 1938 and led by Captain Alfred Richer, a World War I naval commander. The crew was formed around polar experience rather than the Nazi Party affiliation. After 3 months spent turning an old warboat into an icebreaker vessel, the captain set sail on December 17th of 1938 with a crew of 82, including scientists, officers, and enlisted men, as well as 2 Dornier flying boats perched on catapults. Which, to clarify what those are, is that they are basically airplanes that are capable of landing on both land and sea. So they have the, I think they're called pontoons. I can't remember. But they have the ability to land on sea and on land. They're a bit lighter. And then they're perched on what you could call little treadmill runways. So basically you don't need as much space to basically get them enough acceleration to where they can start flying right away. It's kind of just a miniature monoplane that it allowed them to have a more compact air units. With the list of who was on the boat did end up having 1 Nazi official on board, as it was required by Hitler that every single naval unit had at least 1 Nazi officer. They reached Antarctica's coastline in about a month, and they began doing reconnaissance using the flying boats. This region had not been explored, and they decided to name it New Schwabenland. They wanted to use the flying boats for 3 things: to photograph the area, to do cartography to understand the terrain, and then the final objective was to claim the area for Germany. However, this did not work out as planned. As many different imperialist societies and civilizations did, their entire way of staking claims on things were basically just to say, I put my stuff there, that means it's mine. And in this case, their plan failed because one of the planes that they planned on dropping a bunch of tiny swastikas out of, it was running out of fuel, so they had to drop extra weight, and one of the things they dropped was the crate full of swastikas. Because they didn't scatter them across the land, it meant that they couldn't claim it. However, even though they did not successfully claim the land, they were still very successful with the photographic surveys that cover large portions of the land, and they added 16% to the known area of Antarctica. The expedition did not go on for very long. They finished their work, and they began the trip home on February 5th, 1939. Although there are many tales of Antarctica Nazi bases, there is no real evidence that Hitler showed any more interest in Antarctica or the area around it. Although in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was formed and signed by many countries, including Germany. The treaty declared that Antarctica was a research zone, and all agreeing parties agreed to a no wartime activities, no bombings, no general destruction of the area, and that the area was to be used for scientific purposes only. This is what I was explaining earlier. In some cases, people like to use this as evidence, but to me, it just seems like a very general thing to sign if you have any stake in ever going back to a possible scientific site. Next in the conspiracies were reports that there were Nazi U-boats landing in Argentina, and that Hitler himself is quoted in stating that this is true, as in he said, yes, some U-boats made it to Argentina. The theory goes on stating that Nazis built a facility there. So let's go ahead and break this one down. So it is actually true the 2 Nazi U-boats, which are submarines, actually emerged a couple months after the war near Argentina. All the vessels that were out at sea at the time were radioed, and they were told to return to the nearest Allied ports and to surrender. They were told this by the Allied forces and by German commanders. However, there were 2 U-boats that refused this order and went dark. Basically, no one could get a hold of them, and they weren't communicating to anyone, and because they were in submarines, they were capable of basically staying under for long periods of times and just hiding. They were U-boats U-530 and U-977. They ended up showing up in Argentina a few months later. However, Argentina not only intercepted them, but they captured and interrogated all of the crews, because there were rumors that U-boat 530 was carrying gas weapons, which were later confirmed. Supposedly, the gas was destroyed, although that part is not entirely clear. There is very little evidence to support that there is any Nazi bunkers in Argentina or South America as a whole. If you can hear my pet bird in the background, I do apologize. It's hormone season, so he's being a little crazy. There's also very little evidence that Hitler escaped using body doubles and made it to Argentina. It seems extremely unlikely and pretty much impossible, actually. The only real evidence that I could find that said that there might have been a Nazi facility in Argentina was purely based on the fact that they found some World War II era German coins in the area. However, that area that they found it in was a popular tourist spot, and that included for Germans. So it seems way more likely that there was a bunch of tourists that ended up just dropping coins there that were of that era. However, because of Operation Paperclip, there were many unaccounted for Nazi scientists, and it is hard to be sure that other countries didn't snatch them up and basically end up using them for their scientific bases, for research, for many things. Operation Paperclip is this entire thing all its own, and I might do a deep dive on that, even though that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just an operation that the U.S. military did among other countries that also took Nazi scientists into their ranks. So in closing, Operation High Jump had many goals, which they accomplished most of them. and there is a chance that they were there looking for Nazi bases, as Hitler did carry out some really strange and ridiculous plans. He talked about a lot of strange and ridiculous plans, but that is part of the issue in imagining that Hitler did all these different things, is that Hitler liked to do a lot of things that were more bluster, and basically a lot of what he did was self-propaganda, where he would make ridiculous bluffs, or he would talk really big about something, but in reality nothing was actually happening with that. He did that a lot to make not only himself but the Nazi Party just seem more powerful, or less understandable, and he did it to kind of like a scare tactic for his enemies. And that, combined with the fact that there is just almost no evidence that Hitler went to Argentina, that the two U-boats, dropped people off beforehand, that there was any Nazi bases in Antarctica, it just seems really implausible that he did anything like that. It's also stated that Byrd was proposed to have gone to Antarctica to find Agartha. Agartha is its own deep dive, and I don't want to discuss that too heavily in this one, because this is more related to Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump, and Agartha, yes, has Byrd in it, but that's an entire thing all its own. I do want to do a deep dive on that, but not in this video. So it's time for this part. Is it truth or is it foil? It's a channel name, Truth or Foil. What I mean by that is there truth in it, or is it foil, as in, is it just some conspiracy theorist's wet dream? It's just nonsense. Well, I will say that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and what that means is just because there isn't evidence to support something doesn't mean that that generates evidence that something doesn't exist. With that in mind, there is some possibilities that there is some truth, as there is some, not a lot, but there is very finite amounts of evidence to support some of these theories. However, a lot of them are circumstantial at best. So because of that, and on top of the fact that there's so much evidence, so many experts that disagree with all of this, I'm gonna have to say it's foil. For me, I'm calling this foil because there is just not nearly enough evidence to support some of these theories. There's not a lot of reason to support them, just because why would he have set up a base in Antarctica? There really is just no reason to have done it. Sure, you could then go down the conspiracy rabbit hole and be like, oh, because Agartha is there, or because there's secret stuff going on there. But that, you're just starting to put yourself down a rabbit hole at that point. And if you can't find any basis of evidence or fact in the first conspiracy, you can't back it up with more conspiracies. That's a really slippery slope. Like I said, I do want to do a deep dive on Agartha. I'll probably do that next video, actually, because I really am interested in kind of evaluating and looking at some of the ideas behind that. Because the idea of Agartha, some people are like, hey, it's a hollow earth theory, which has to do with flat earth, and that's nonsense. But there is other theories that say that it's more of a biodome that's secluded on its own in different parts of the world. And we have actually found kind of, biodome might not be the right term, but we have found things similar to that in different parts of the world already that were very secluded and hard to find. So that in itself means that there could be some truth to that. So that could be worth investigating and looking at. Please support me by liking, sharing, and subscribing to my content. I plan on making more content like this, and I do enjoy doing it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. We'll decide if it's truth or foil.